coming up next on Another View, being a black man in America. African American males are least likely to graduate high school, attend college, marry, or be gainfully employed than any other ethnic group. Black males are more likely to be incarcerated, victims of homicide, and have prostate cancer and diabetes. Goodness, is there any good news about being black and African American? Stay tuned as our Another View Roundtable tackles the issue of being black and a man. Carol, Bill, Wil, and Roger are here, along with special guest Steven Gayle, generational perspectives about the progress of black men when we return right after this news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. And before our roundtable gets started, and they are here and ready to go, I just want to take a couple of seconds to thank the Girl Scout Council of Colonial Coast for honoring me as a woman of courage, confidence, and character. And I really appreciate this. And I want to thank Paula Bazemore, who accepted the award for me because I had to be in Colonial Williamsburg last weekend, where the Steadfast Spirits weekend was going on, and look at women and slavery. And there was a play called Liberty for Lydia. And we moderated a panel after that discussion. It was a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Sweet Honey in the Rock, an a cappella group, African-American women, sang and did a concert that evening. And it was probably one of the most diverse audiences I think I have seen since I have lived for 17 years in Hampton Roads. There was a little bit of everybody there, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time. So thank you to Colonial Williamsburg. And we want to say a special hello and welcome to Norfolk, to everybody attending the MEAC, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. This is the 42nd year for men's basketball, the 34th year for women's basketball. And there are 13 HBCUs, including Norfolk State and Hampton University, as part of the MEAC. Unfortunately, Norfolk State lost to Bethune-Cookman in overtime on Wednesday night, 70-68. They were the defending MEAC champions, but they will go on to the NIT tournament. And Hampton University, unfortunately, lost to Delaware State last night, 63-60. So both of our local schools from the men's side are out, but in women's basketball, the Hampton University Lady Pirates beat Delaware State last night, 63-28. So they're going on to the semifinals. But NSU's women lost to North Carolina A&T 78-47. So interesting times, lots of people in town from out of town, and we hope that you are enjoying Norfolk's hospitality. So it seems like African American men just cannot catch a break. No matter the statistic, this cohort is on the wrong side. From incarceration to education to employment to family to church, the recorded outlook is bleak. Yet every day we see African American men who are successful, employed, married, have children, and are living life the best way they can. So why don't we hear about this side of African American men? The Another View Roundtable is here to tackle the issue of being a black man in America. Please welcome Roger Chesley, columnist for the Virginian-Pilot. Hey, Roger.
Hi, Barbara.
How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
You?
I'm great. NSU political science professor Carol Pretlow. Hi, Carol. You feeling better?
Much better.
Great. We missed you last month.
Ready to take it on.
Okay. Community activist Bill Thomas. Hi, Bill.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. I'm praying for a better America.
And author, journalist, and talk show host Wil LaVeist. Hi, Wil.
How you doing, Barbara? And I'm praying for a bill always.
Pray to your God. Don't pray to me. Pray to God of your enslavers first.
And we have a special guest with us today, local filmmaker Steven Gayle. Hi, Steven.
How you doing?
So glad that you're joining us. And we asked Steven to join us today because we want to take a generational look at what's going on with African American men in America today. So we've got someone from their 20s, their 40s, They're
That would be
50s.
me. That would be me.
They're 60s. So those are the generations that are represented. And I want to start by asking the question, particularly to you fellas, do you think that it is harder to be an African-American male today than it was, say, 10 years ago? Yeah, Steven, you may have a different perspective. Let me start with the older gentleman first. Roger?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably harder now so much because of the job situation. Mostly that would be the biggest difference today than perhaps 10 years ago. But I was looking maybe longer term, 30 years ago, and you'd have to believe that the outlook where we're headed is so much more disappointing, so much more pessimistic today than perhaps 30 years ago. So
at the height of the civil rights movement, we were more positive.
Yeah, and maybe even going back a little bit farther than that, just with the advent of affirmative action, with the advent of coming out of the Vietnam War, and what were our cities looking like? Now I know we had some problems even as far back as then, but especially with the huge numbers of our cohort in prison. I was invited by St. Bride's Correctional Center a couple of weeks ago to speak at a Black History Month event that they had. And of course, you would expect that a lot of the individuals there would be Black who would attend the event, but of the 50 people that were there, all but 3 were Black men, and it's a jarring image. It's a jarring realization of how many of us are behind bars. And yes, some of us have committed crimes. That's not the issue. The fact of the matter is we are treated so much more disproportionately worse than folks of white men.
We actually found a stat. There are more Black men in prison today than were enslaved in 1850. Yeah, that's just. And Bill, you rolled your eyes when I said when Roger first started talking. Are they better now?
It's gone. You guys are talking about history. We've lost it all. Roger made a good point. I was raised in Fort Leavenworth, which has the Army, Navy, Air Force, even they also have a federal prison there. And when we were growing up, we used to play baseball, and the prisoners sponsored our team, and they're all white. When they used to come out to the chain gangs and their trucks and stuff, we used to throw rocks at them because we figured that, what are you guys doing in jail and stuff? You didn't see any Black folks in jail. They were all white folks. And it just on his comment there, it's kind of amazing now how we have forgotten our roots. We have no moral values, not all of us, but the ones that are in prison, the ones that are more in prison than in school. Those folks that just they're immoral. We've lost our moral values. It's the only thing that's the difference between 40 years ago, and in my judgment, and now is the fact that we had stern discipline, and discipline was treated as love. And if you did something in your house, you got your head knocked off because the problem was solved there and you weren't going to go to the police. And now we have the disrespect of Black women. That's at a record. I think that's the worst kind of thing that happened. I just had a conversation with some folks from Norfolk, and they were saying that this woman who had turned in a guy who murdered her boyfriend over here in one of these housing projects, and then he got off because nobody would come and testify. Then his brother went and killed her. I mean, so we have just lost it, and a lot of people don't want to hear this. It's over. It's over.
Is it over, Will?
No, it's far from over. It's far from over. Is it harder? I don't know if it's harder. Is it tough? Yes, it's tough. Is it complex? Definitely it's complex because, I spoke at St. Ives before as well. And when you look in prisons and you see all of the talent that's in prisons, it really boggles your mind and can really get you down. But then also when you see a lot of the talent and a lot of the things that are being created by people who have very little to work with, it gives you a reason to be optimistic. And our people have always come from situations where we haven't had a lot to work with, and we've created a lot of miracles. And so when you look at being a Black man in this society, what it means is that it's about being an overcomer. Let's be honest. Competing in this society is tough for everybody, even for people who are given a lot of advantages. It can be tough. But when you look at, being an African American male and why we live sicker and die younger and all of those stats that you just gave, it's because of the way the society is structured and the odds are against us and that we have to overcome them. Mm-hmm. But when you look at what we've been able to achieve, I think it gives tremendous reason for hope. And that's what we have to do, is to not buy into the images and the messages that we're getting from society and told that we're inferior and all of those things, and continue to grab on to our tradition of being overcomers.
Stephen, you're in your late 20s, so you probably have a little bit of a different perspective, maybe?
Yes. I mean, I think that the world that we're living in today is vastly different than 10 years ago, than 20 years ago, 40 years ago, completely. It's moving faster. So just my generation as a whole, we're in a different space. The things that were true or that were prevalent in the 90s and the early 2000s even aren't the case anymore.
Give an example. Yeah.
Education, for one. A bachelor's doesn't guarantee a job. It doesn't guarantee employment. It doesn't guarantee the fact that you're going to be able to support a family. Mm-hmm. You have to have more than one thing going on. I think out of the friends that I have, each of us have at least 2 or 3 different talents that we can actually make income off of. And I don't think that's necessarily something that generations past had to think about or had to be aware of, and to the same level that we are. I think as far as even when it comes to the murder rate, even when it comes to something like the murder rate, that has been steadily declining in the United States over the past few decades. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just because the media is a little bit more diffused in our society now, I think that has made people a little bit more aware of the things that are going on.
So you're saying that may in fact make it seem like it's worse than it actually is? Is that what you mean?
I think to an extent. I mean, not completely, but definitely to an extent. I mean, somebody hits their wife or bashes them over the head, as you might have said. You hear about it. You might see it on television. You might see it on the internet, Facebook, Twitter. There are all these different things that these particular instances get diffused across, and it seems like it's a larger issue than it is.
Carol, from a woman's perspective, you think it's harder for Black men?
I don't know whether I can compare, because of course each generation has challenges, and I think I agree with you that each time we as a people have had a challenge, I've been proud that we've overcome it, but we've overcome it because of the community base and because, yes, the home and the discipline. And speaking from a woman's perspective, I know that in my family, if I did something, it was not just my parents correcting me. It was everybody in that community saying, Carol Pretlow, stop doing so and so and so. And I didn't, I get the response even in schools at Norfolk State sometimes, what you got to do with this? Right. That never occurred to me. Now, maybe it's because our families have changed, and maybe it's because the community is not as responsive to some of that change, and maybe it's because the expectations of education, as you said, have changed.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about issues facing African American men in society today. Bill, you've been shaking your head for the whole time.
No, I don't, because nothing really has changed. What has changed is that we don't respect ourselves. We don't respect God. We don't have morals. When I lived in my neighborhood outside Kansas City, I can't remember a Black person getting murdered, period. I don't know anybody. I remember one, Lawrence Johnson. He murdered somebody in the fight in the bar, and I was like 18 years old. That's the only one that I remember. We don't have.
So you're talking about the community was more cohesive.
The community was more. The community had rules, and they obeyed them. We didn't have 90% of the kids going out here having babies without marrying or having some committed relationship to the woman. I mean, nothing has changed. We had 2 jobs. I used to mop floors at night and then go work down at the bank during the day, and then went to school again in between the most. So we've always had a multiplicity of task-oriented things. That's not new. The world hasn't changed. Our mind has changed. We just don't respect each other. Our children don't respect each other. They call themselves names, and they don't want to adhere to what the real values are. The white and Jewish communities are the same as they were when they first landed on the Plymouth Rock. solid, family oriented. No, they are. No, they are. And they are, for the most part, doing things right. And the wealth and the economics and the values are far, far more projected. Let me give you one example.
Okay.
Joe Rubin. Joe Rubin is in Facebook, and he has his whole family there. And it's just so respectful of how he honors his kids getting out of school, getting married, having grandchildren and things. Those are the kinds of things where we used to have, and it was employment now. The younger generation don't understand that today, for the most part, in my judgment, our churches are no more than entertainment centers. They don't treat the values, they don't treat the symptoms of the problems. They just go along with it. No, sir, things have not changed. We have changed, and we just are now being a part of that. But when you tell me, in the past 18 years, 265,000 African Americans have died on the streets of America. 265,000. And there's no moral outrage? Are you kidding me? No, sir, I don't agree.
Will?
Well, Bill hasn't changed.
Yeah, when I was from law school,
when I was the one of the pleasures I had when I was the editor of Mixed Magazine, which was a multicultural publication out here, gave me the opportunity to spend a lot of time with different people of different backgrounds and to learn some things about different communities. And when you talk to people and you really spend time with people, you find that the immigrant story plays out in all of these different communities. You find that white communities, white people have issues and problems. I just coming into the station today, I just heard a stat on this station about how, out of wedlock births are now at 50%. And that's a lot of that number is also including people who are in the middle class. Okay, so what is that telling you? That's telling you that a lot of people, a lot of white people, a lot of people of other ethnic groups are having out of wedlock births. So one of the things about the black community is that we've always been, in a lot of ways, throughout America's history, sort of the pulse of what is going on in America. The saying about, if America catches a cold, the black community's got a flu. Mm-hmm. So what that should be telling you is that in a system where you got a group of people who are disadvantaged at the advantage of another group of people, that's racism. That's what we have here. It also tells you that what are the problems that are going on in the entire country you see playing out in a strong way in that group of people as disadvantaged. So when Bill gives the impression that all these other groups are all doing fine and they're solid and there are no problems in the Jewish community, these communities, please, please.
Yeah. Facts are facts.
There are parts of both of what both of you said, Will and Bill, that are true. But I think the biggest thing, yes, whites, Jews, Asians, they have issues, but ours always seem to be worse. And statistics bear this out. Mm-hmm. And our education, education has been one of the main ways that African Americans have gotten ahead in this country. And when you see the problem with our public schools, our private schools not educating enough, we're not doing as well, that means it's going to be tougher for us to get into college, which means at a time now when more colleges are requiring that you have to take loans out, the states aren't helping as much with young people getting into college, so that's more of a burden on families. That means a lot of families a lot of black families are going to have to take loans out if they want to go to good schools, good colleges, and universities. We bear the brunt of it. But also on some of the social issues, we're always at the worst end of it in terms of homicides, in terms of home ownership, in terms of educational attainment. It's very real that the outlook, I think, has been very
and the reason why you just made my point is because we are in a racist system that
disadvantages. That might be the case. What do you do with it?
Hold on. Okay, you guys, hold on, because the people can't understand us when we're all yelling at the same time.
What do you do with it? Yeah, okay, acknowledge that. Fine. What do we do with it? And the problem is, I think we don't have a decent way of trying to grapple with a lot of these issues.
And we used to.
agree.
And I just said earlier that part of our existence in this system is being able to overcome those
overcome
disadvantages.
what?
That's what I just said.
Can I just
so
so
you're making my point.
No, 50 years, and I don't think I am, Will, but 50 years ago when we were dealing with the civil rights movement, it seemed like even when we were being killed, our very life was being crushed by the system. Literally, we were being killed.
In the streets.
It seemed like we had more of a purpose. It seemed like we loved each other a little bit more. It seemed like we had more moral values and more of a sense that education was a good thing. 50 years hence, when racism is more subtle, when whites are not killing us in the same way, we seem to be at a loss for which path to go. The bulk of us. Now, I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about the bulk of us as a people. You see this in the statistics. You see this in the news accounts.
Well, let me ask this question.
It's true.
Let me ask this question. How much then does class play a part within the African American community in terms of dealing with this?
I think that's the main problem, though.
Okay, Steven.
I think that's where it starts from, because if you look at the African American community as a whole, we started off with a unique set of circumstances to begin with. So that's why, and which is the institution of slavery and racism. Not necessarily racism, because that impacts a lot of different minority groups, but slavery in particular impacted us exclusively.
How did slavery impact you?
Well, I mean,
you said slavery impacted us. How did it impact
hold
you?
on. Let him
Okay,
answer.
well, from
Let him
my
answer.
personal standpoint, the entire reason why my family started living in Philadelphia came from the fact that after slavery, my family moved to Philadelphia because that's where black people were more accepted. So, I mean, those things do kind of play a role. That played a role into where we were able to locate in the city, which then the area in the city was lower income.
Nah, man.
Then afterward, over time, you started seeing different aspects, the drug culture, the crack epidemic, coming into those communities that were impoverished to begin with because they were African American. And then that ended up being stratified into more societal problems.
Carol.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate. Yes, I agree that racism is a part of what we are, what we were, and even what we have become. So now, how do you respond to people who say, get over it,
Right.
move on? How do we do it? Now, Roger, when you said the subtleties, I think that's why it's difficult for us to come up with a solution, because racism now has taken a different form. It's more subtle.
Let me ask a question of you guys.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're walking down the street today, because this used to be a big deal in the 90s in particular, and I'm curious as to whether it's still an issue, or if you get on an elevator and you are there with particularly a white female, do you still get that same reaction, that fear reaction? Is that going on anymore?
I just most recently did. Absolutely. That's why when I go places, I go out, I'm looking the way I should be looking. Otherwise, they look at you.
Okay, well then let me ask you this. As you're walking down the street, African American men, and you see a group of African American young men, pants slung, you know the stereotype. Is there a fear factor within you?
I cross the street.
I don't cross the
I
street,
don't either.
I cross the
depending
street.
on the neighborhood that I'm in, and depending on the type of reactions I see on the street, yeah, I'm sometimes worried. If I'm out somewhere and it's a group of young white men,
Well, that was gonna be my next question.
who are cursing, who seem to have their hats all backward, and don't
And
look
they
like
also
they're-
have the slouching
Yeah,
pants.
if they look like they're up to no good, yeah, I'm
I
looking
cross the
extra
street,
then
too.
too.
Me too.
It's not. I think it's more the attitude that you see from the young
Right.
people that you encounter, more so than the race of them.
So Stephen, as a young person, because you all bear the brunt of this of what we're talking about, why? First of all, should people be fearful? And secondly, why is that such a stereotype or such a concern?
As far as should people be fearful, I think that starts off with the whole idea of being street smart. That basic concept of looking at your surroundings and taking note of what's going on around you. Just because there's a group of black people standing together doesn't necessarily mean they're violent. But then at the same time, if you're in a particular neighborhood that you're not familiar with and they look like particularly violent individuals, well, then you need to take according action, cross the street, avoid them, do whatever you need to do. But I think to immediately associate them with a particular image, well, what makes us any better than the people that characterize us a particular way? And I guess maybe because I look at it that these people are among my generation, I have a different understanding of what to perceive as violent or what to perceive as a risk behavior. So I don't know. I think you just have to take according action.
Bill?
I just think that we have as a race, and some of us, not all of us, 'cause some of them quite well. You mentioned that we don't have these good role models. We absolutely do. President Barack Obama, best role model in the world. Proud that he is where he is, black man, doing the right thing with the right families and all those kind of issues. So that's monarchy. We have the models. We just don't have the morals and the values and the respect for ourselves to live our lives the way we should.
Okay, and I'm going to follow up on that. But Jonathan joins us from Hampton. Hi, Jonathan. You're on the air.
Hi, I just turned the radio on, and I heard something, and it bothered me so much. I was at VCU a couple of nights ago, and I'm at the graduate school, and I'm getting ready to get on the elevator, and the elevator opens up, the door swings open, there's a white woman in there with a purse. She moves her purse from the right to the left, away from me. I just walked, pushed a button, and got on and walked up the stairs.
So you didn't even get on the elevator?
I didn't even get on the elevator. And she didn't even look at me crazy. It was just the motion of her moving her purse. And I'm thinking, this lady thinks I'm going to rob her. I have on a coat and tie.
Didn't matter.
And I just walked my way up the elevator. I mean, up the stairs. I'm still upset about it right now.
So how do you think we change that? How does that image change?
It's all about image. It's all about presentation. I just heard something a few seconds ago about when you see 4 white kids walking down the street, you feel pretty safe. See 4 black kids with hoodies on, you move out of the way.
Absolutely.
It's crazy, but that's the society we live in. I've never been in trouble. Never been in trouble. But I understand how people fear that image of the 4 kids coming towards you with the hoodie. It's Trayvon Martin kind of stuff.
It's hurtful.
Jonathan, thank you for your call. We really appreciate you weighing in on the conversation. Roger?
See, the one difference, and I'm glad he gave his viewpoints on that. The one difference, I'm so obstinate that I would have gotten on that elevator and made her deal with it because I have just as much a right to be on that elevator as she does.
But it dehumanizes you, man. It does.
Wait a minute.
Makes you feel bad.
You know what? But you can't always change another's viewpoint about you, about the reaction to you, but you can go about living your life the best way that you can, and that's sometimes the only way you can change a certain image of you. But I would have gotten on the elevator because I had just as much right, and I might not have felt like walking that day.
But Bill, you said it dehumanizes you.
It dehumanizes you. All I've worked for, Roger, all you've done, the great family you have raised, the morals and convictions. Today in 2013, you get on the elevator, they look you in the eye, and then they do something. And then it's just, what is this?
Well, it's the same way for black women because I got on an elevator about 2 weeks ago at MacArthur's and a lady turned to me and said, I'm going to the 3rd floor. And I said, so wonderful for you.
There you go.
But when I got off, I was like,
though.
how in the world did she assume that I was running the elevator?
It's hurtful.
Oh, that's what I didn't understand what you meant. So she thought that you were the elevator operator.
Dehumanizing.
Yeah, and it is dehumanizing.
Well, you see how God works. When I mentioned that we live in a system of racism, all of my colleagues over here, generationally,
let him finish.
They all, and this shows you how generations play out. As a Gen Xer, you got Gen Y over here. As soon as I said that, they all raised and jumped into this minimalization mode of we don't want to call it what it is. And what I'm saying is that
hold on.
notice. You notice I've been silent. You notice? And what I'm saying is that for me to call it what it is doesn't mean that I'm running around blaming somebody and this and that and the other. I'm identifying what it is. And I'm saying that what we need to do is we need to renew our minds, change our mind, get in an overcoming mode and not buy into these things. Because they don't even realize that they're actually buying into what racism wants you to do.
That's a bunch of garbage.
They want you to do.
Okay, hold on.
You see how defensive they are?
Roger.
They're actually buying into it.
I know. Let's let
That's
Roger
a bunch
go.
of garbage. First of all, it can
so
still
angry?
be a racist
Why are you so
society.
angry?
We can still have some vestiges of racism and say it is not. It is much less racist today than it was 40 years ago. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. I'm saying we can't blame racism on every one of our problems. And secondly, even with, because you said that we were just, we were wrong on this.
Not wrong.
And secondly, what do you do about the society?
Kill them?
Just because there's racial problems now, what do you do to try to overcome them? And I think, lastly,
He's making my point again. That is
Hold
what
on.
I said.
Lastly,
That's exactly what
I think we have to
hold
stop
on.
blaming racism on too many things.
Amen.
We still have to do better about education. We still have to do better about what we're doing in our own homes.
Raise your children.
Hold on. V joins us from Roanoke Rapids. Hi, V. You're on the air.
Hi. I would like to just touch on an issue that was briefly highlighted, and it's about image. Our young children, especially our males, are constantly bombarded with images of other people who are heroes, other people who will take the chance and save the day. And when a young male sees this, it implies to him, I believe, that this other person is better, that he's not expected to be the one to stand up and defend. And I feel like these images have been bombarding our people, our young people, for more than 30 years, since the advent, since TV really has taken over in the movies. And I think it affects how they feel about themselves. And sometimes this anger will turn around and reinforce the negative because of their anger, because they see themselves as not being accepted.
V, thank you for that call. I'm going to turn to Steven because I'd like to get your perspective on that as a young person.
Well, I think that most people that of my age or my age range, when they see certain images, I think they look at themselves as being the exception to the rule, more than likely. If it's a negative image, they're saying, oh, well, yeah, that's them on television, but that's not me. That's not really us. Even if they fall into that category, or even if they don't fall into that category, they might look at it as though they're the exception to the rule and that's being played out. And to speak to what was just being discussed earlier, I feel like the idea of identifying what is racism, identifying that slavery had an impact, because it had to have. It had to have had a huge impact on where we are today. By identifying that and by stating that as the given premise for the African American community, and then going forward with all the other societal problems afterward being imposed on this group of people, that's how you find your issues. That's how you identify your problem and then find your solutions, as opposed to looking at the result and trying to fix the result as opposed to the problem.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the challenges of being an African American and male with the Another View Roundtable. Roger Chesley with the Virginian-Pilot, Carol Pretlow with Norfolk State University, community activist Bill Thomas, journalist and author Wil LaVeist, and special guest, local filmmaker Steven Gayle. So, what do we do? Roger has said now twice, more than twice. What do we need to start doing?
I already told you that.
Go ahead.
On some of the parts of our community, we just got to give up on. We can't save all these people. And I know y'all don't want to hear that. There's not enough resources. There's sometimes you just have to bite the bitter bullet. It's been done before in the early 1900s with the Talented 10th. We have such immorality in our system. It's in our blood. I'm not a slave. See, I was taught not to be a slave. So slavery has nothing to do with me. The only thing slavery taught me to do is to get educated and then go get a Second Amendment and get a gun and to protect myself and my family if they want to try to make me a slave again. It's the morality that we have now. It's this framework that anything is possible. Everything can be done. The government is responsible for everything. I'm telling you, that's what the problem is.
But if we give up
I was going to make that point.
on the people, then how do we turn the morality around if we give up on them?
Train the young. Get the babies, get them out of
But
these.
you've got this whole group of people who are still on this earth right now.
Most of them going to jail anyhow.
No,
so we need to figure it out.
I'm not willing to give up on anybody because I don't know if there's a future doctor out there that's going to cure cancer. I don't know if there's a future scientist that's going to make certain things possible to make us be able to use our resources here on the earth better. I'm not willing to give up because there might be a future journalist who will own his own radio station, TV station, newspaper, and hire all of us at our old age, even you, Steve.
Carol?
No, I'm disturbed by this giving up on them, because then if we just isolate them, they are still having an impact on our society, and your tax dollars and my tax dollars are going to pay for them regardless. You're not going to have a choice, because they're a part of the society. You mean when you pay taxes, you get to say, okay, it goes to this, but not this and not that?
All right, I want to change the conversation for a little bit, because I want to ask you all, particularly as middle-class, successful African-American men, what is your responsibility in terms of mentoring others, in terms of lifting up others? Is there a responsibility, or is everybody out there for themselves?
Absolutely.
Will?
That was one of the solutions to your question, is that me personally, I have young men that I work with and mentor personally. I think one of the breakdowns in the community has been the lack of transferring generational knowledge. And so when I hear Bill speaking passionately like that, I don't just dismiss him. I understand his passion. I understand that he really cares. And I would encourage listeners to just not dismiss what he's saying, but understand that he's speaking out of a passion that comes from his generation. But at the same time, I would encourage Bill and others of his generation to share the knowledge and the experience that they have gained with younger generations, to explain to them the from whence we've came and the things that he learned and how he navigated certain things, so that they won't have to stumble upon the same things. And then I think that the younger generation has got to have a mind to listen. Because a lot of times, when young people do not listen, that's when folks get frustrated. They're trying to pour into you out of their pain and out of their experience, and then you're acting like you don't want to hear what they have to say, and what they're talking about is ancient history. That shuts people down.
Stephen?
Well, I mean, I've done mentoring tons of times just through the organizations that I've been involved with. But I agree with that. It's almost that's your charge as an adult to look after the next generation, to bring up the next generation to an extent. I mean, I feel like that's almost innate for human beings to do that. But
what about the older generation too? I mean, aren't there some things that you want to explain to the Bills and the Rogers and the Wills of today to understand you better?
Well, I think first off, you can't have a defeatist attitude when it comes to any individual. So as far as where they're going to turn to, or what kind of person they're going to develop into, I mean, you look at Malcolm X. He started off as being a criminal. Now all of a sudden he becomes this icon for our people.
He got a U.S. stamp, and he was called an anti-patriot.
He's been arrested for crimes that, if you saw him walking down, you could easily see a Malcolm X walking down Church Street any given time. So, I mean, you do have to think about that as well. But then on top of that, regarding the older generation looking after us, or, how that disconnect occurs, there's always been that disconnect between every generation. And I feel like if you say that the answer is to be moral or to instill morals, well, then how come at this point in time we are where we are? If that was the key, if that was the thing that worked, if that was what we have to go back to, well, then it happened.
Let me answer that question. Why we are where we are?
Go ahead.
Integration. Integration, in my judgment, was the worst thing that could have ever happened to us. Malcolm X got straight because he got religions too, and he had it before, so he got his roots back. But I think integration and us buying into this moral, liberal attitude that everything is relative, nothing is sacred, and these kind of issues. And then we had these crutches that we use that they put us on: welfare, look like them, act like them, be a part. We used to be a strong people with our own values, where sometimes in Cleveland, I could go for a month without ever seeing a white person and was better off for it.
Someone like Malcolm X actually had someone to mentor him into that faith. So, I mean, to some extent, you are correct. I do agree with you that, some of those things do play a role, that you have to be mindful of those
And then
things.
he ended up trying to kill his mentor, too. All I'm trying to say is the fact that you have to have those values.
Without integration, you don't get Roger Chesley over there writing for the state's largest newspaper, as angry as he is today.
Well, maybe there could have been largest newspaper.
He's still very much producing content and a voice and giving people a perspective that they otherwise wouldn't have.
Roger?
Yeah, I would just say that I disagree with that. And if anybody knows history, they'll also know that Malcolm X, at the end of his life, turned against the Nation of Islam and became more mainstream Muslim. And realized that people who didn't look like him also could be somebody positive in his or her life. But I disagree with Bill on that. I think we lost something when integration came, but I'm not sure if it was because of integration that was the reason for losing that. Yeah, we do have some problems with values. We do have problems with self-love. I would like to see us get back to not hurting each other so much.
And that is a big point. Ruth joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Ruth. You're on the air.
Hi. As I was saying earlier, I'm an immigrant. I came as a 17-year-old college student some 20-some years ago. And my friends who happen to be Africans, we are from Africa, we talk about this all the time. Yes, there was slavery. Yes, there was the civil rights. Yes, there is racism. But at what point do families decide that in order to get themselves out of the situations they are, that education is the key, that they have the privileges of every man, that if you went outside of the United States, not all of us have the opportunity, the luck, the resources that Americans and African Americans have. We talk about this all the time. What is it? It's choices people make, we see. The choices, they decide school is not, it's not cool to be a smart student. It's not cool to be, the ways out are sports or music, and which is nothing wrong with that. But majority of us have to lift our communities up by education and educating our children. Okay. That's why I think I see Africans who come here, like myself, who do well. Because we come from nothing, but you guys have a lot. And somehow the community has failed to see how much it has in order to lift itself up.
Okay, Ruth, let's let the panel respond. We appreciate your phone call. Will?
I agree with a lot of what she's saying. To identify, as my younger brother said, to identify what's going on does not mean that you are casting blame. It's making your vision clearer to be able to address the problem. And when she's leaving from Africa, leaving her place of oppression, just like Irish left Ireland for their place of oppression to make a better life. If you are in your place of oppression, a lot of times it becomes harder for you to be able to see what your solutions are. So that's why we had to identify it and then renew our minds and perform the proper strategies that's going to get you to overcome it. And one of the things I like to point out for a solution, for example, all black churches, these larger churches that have the ability to, should have K through pre-K through 6th or 8th grade schools, or should have summer program schools that will be in the business of renewing our minds, of preparing us for technologies, to being a supplement to the public education system, which we just a few programs ago had somebody on who was basically buying in to institutional racism. So we have to identify what it is and then apply the proper strategy and stop being afraid that if we identify, that means we're racist.
But let me throw this out to you all, because I want to get your response to this. The SHOT report, which for the past 9 years has been tracking African American males in school. We keep talking about how education is the key. 2009-10 marked the first year that more than half of the nation's black males in grade 9 graduated with regular diplomas 4 years later. Now, at that rate, it would take 50 years for black males to have the same graduation rate as the white counterparts. So beyond our sending them to school, there's something else wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
There has to be.
And that's where I bring in the churches. My church, Calvary Community Church in Hampton, has a school that a lot of times, and one of the oldest schools on the peninsula, that a lot of times doesn't get the support that a lot of these churches that they would be instilling the moral fiber at a younger age. Our churches have always been in the business of this. Our kids were being trained in the basements during the civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
Our churches are the ones that established schools when we came out of slavery. Come on.
Okay, but even before the churches, what about the family?
I just gave you two solutions.
What about the family?
I just gave you two.
Yeah, I think the problem too is that the family has changed. In my generation, it was very rare to see single parents parents, and now we do have them. And so we need to begin to work with them to help them help their children. Instead of isolating them and casting dispersion on them, let's see, maybe the churches can help us to identify. It's not too late. Stop saying that, Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
It's too late. Here's the problem. Here's what I'm saying. And Will is right on with this. Instead of allowing, like say our African-American elected officials, they're against private schools. They're against church schools. They're against all the things that creates institutional racism. That's what's killing us. We did do that. I was raised and educated in a church school. My parents refused to allow us until they forced us to integrate with the white folks. We got a good education, but now our institutions are broken. Our churches are broken for the most part. There are some goods, but most of them are just big carnivals with big TV entertainment centers. Our schools are not teaching our kids, and you're saying it's going to take 5 generations at the present system to even make an effect. In our murders in our streets, we don't have businesses to support our communities. Look at Church Street, look at any MLK Street in Philadelphia or Kansas City. They're all gone. So our basic institutions, and now the system has institutionalized us to hate each other, to kill each other, to think the only way that we can make a living is dancing or singing or running out there knocking our head off with a football. And then it's so bad, then they take a great guy, who I think is a great guy, Barack Obama, very well educated, very smart, and they marginalize him. So, and then we don't do anything about it. So that's what frustrates me.
But I understand, and I'm frustrated by the same thing, but that doesn't mean we just throw up our hands and identify the problem and say, oh yeah, this is it. Let's begin step one. What can we do to resolve the problem? And maybe church schools are it, or maybe after school study, or maybe working with the homeless, or whatever. We've got to have some identifiable plan.
Well, I just gave you 2.
Okay. Yes,
exactly.
And over the.
I want to get Mark. I want to get a call in if we can.
Yes,
Mark joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Good afternoon to all. I certainly see that all of you have very strong points, and I really do agree with Mr. Thomas quite a bit. Other than the extent of giving up, Mr. Thomas, I would say that the issue is, to Mr. Thomas's point, is assimilation. And I'm one of the younger people. I'm in the mid 40s, and I do agree that right here in Norfolk, that desegregation, I mean, really just ripped our communities apart.
Amen.
I remember having great uncles that were in business for themselves back in the late 50s, early 60s, that it was nothing for them to have cash flow of $100,000 to $200,000 at any given time.
Amen.
Now, you fast forward that, and you take this false picture of middle class that we so call it, you'd be hard-pressed to find maybe 1 out of 10, if that has that type of cash flow right now that's readily accessible. So if we find a way, some kind of way to just migrate, to be comfortable in the skin that we're in, take a reflection of where we've come, the significance from whence we've come, and like the caller from Africa say, look, we cannot assess our success based on what others have. We have to get back to what our treasures are, and that was faith, that was community, that was trust, that was if you had a cup of sugar and I didn't, I still had it, and I don't have to hear your mouth about he didn't have it or she didn't have it. So I think those are the core pieces I think that we have to get to. And I just say, Mr. Thomas, is that what we also have to do, what the young man also mentioned, is he has the advantage point of understanding the body language and the conversation of the younger people. And I would just say is it's not a matter of being afraid or uncomfortable. I think in order for us to get this train back on the track, it's a lot of us are going to have to suffer some discomfort. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. But we're going to just have to get to the point to understand it's just going to be uncomfortable.
Okay, Mark, thank you so much for your call. We got to move on because we're almost out of time. But go ahead, Will.
Real quick, Mark was on and then he fell off the track when he said that it was integration. That it was our response to integration that is the problem. Our response. You just finished talking about the MEAC, right? Black college, all the best black athletes were in the MEAC and the CIAA. And then during integration, that fell off. What happened? The white schools made an appropriate response to integration by getting those better athletes. So it's not integration tore us up, it's how we responded to it. And part of our problem was the generational disconnect and the class disconnect is why we didn't respond properly.
I just one comment, Bob. First of all, integration did tear us up. But
we in an international global market. I don't want to be in I don't want to be in segregation.
No,
that's
go back
ignorant.
to where you came.
This is an international global market.
Okay, let him finish. Let him finish, and then we're going to wrap up.
I'm putting all my attention to to the babies. I want to get them going right, get them started right, and with our limited resources, I got to give up on something to give back to another. So I'm concentrating on the babies.
Roger.
And you had talked about being mentors before, and what can we do? I'm not in any formal mentorship program, but I think it's important for us who do have the education and the income to do things to be examples, to make appearances at different schools and on shows like this, and to, where we can, in our churches and other places, try to pull people up with us. I think that's one of the best things we can do, and it doesn't take necessarily a program to do that. We can just do that individually, a little bit at a time.
Okay, about 30 seconds each. Well, here's the question. What is the most important thing you want people of other races to know about you as an African-American male?
Good question.
Steven, let's start with you, since you're the youngest.
That initially that we're all different. We're not a monolithic people. We do have different points of view. We do have different outlooks and different experiences, and those all fuse into our personality. So,
okay. Will?
I'm human, and I'm a man.
And anything else you want to add?
And that's it.
And that's it. Okay.
I was born black. I'm died black. And I'm not afraid to live among black people to show our greatness. I'm not afraid to fear the white man at the value of my families. We could have done better if we'd have been left alone to explore our own opportunities and pursuits.
Okay. Carol? I know you're not a black man, but what do you want the society to know about black men from your perspective? That they are
strong, that they are courageous, that they have character, and that they are not afraid to do things that maybe society would say people who are educated who take jobs as janitors. That's still a good job.
Amen.
I want people to know that we are survivors and that we aren't afraid to do the things that maybe other people don't want to do.
Roger, you get the last word.
It's not always about race, true, but when I talk about race, that doesn't make me a racist. And that's still an issue in American society, but it's not the only issue in American society.
Some people say because we talk about this that we are being anti-white. Does it mean if you are pro-black, pro-pride in your culture that you are anti-other cultures?
Of course not.
No. My legacy, my proudness of being black and of being a fearful person that can take care of our own and not have to count on to mess with white folks to live our lives.
Okay, and with that, we'll be right back. Thank you, Roundtable.
What? How you living? What? How you living? And live in color.
It is Sammy Cave.
Hey, this is Tommy Davis, and you're listening to Another View on 89.5 FM.
You brought me here from that big golden nugget in the sky, and I love you for your magical ways. I've got high hopes. I've got high hopes.
Tommy Davidson, we appreciate that. Lots of thought-provoking conversation today. If you missed part of it or you want to share this show with a friend, check out our podcasts. There are two ways to find them. Visit anotherviewradio.org, or you can go to WHRV.org, click on Listen, and then on Podcasts. And Lisa and I love to hear your thoughts about Another View. Send us a message on our Facebook page or leave one at anotherviewradio.org. And while you're there, also sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week, a look at healthcare reform from a doctor's perspective. It's Another View on Health with Dr. Keith Newby. For producer Lisa Godley, audio engineer Perry Smith, and I don't have the intern's name who answered the phone, Danielle Jenkins. Thank you, Danielle, who answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a great weekend, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.